Coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline, terrorists in Gaza fire rockets at Israeli civilians. Could this erupt into another war? Plus, controversy swirls over a Palestinian settlement outside of Jerusalem. Why it's drawing an international spotlight. Plus, honoring Holocaust victims on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The incredible story of a woman who survived the unthinkable. And praying for Israel at the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. All this and more on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The Israel Defense Forces launched a powerful raid against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group, saying they took the action to prevent a major future attack. In retaliation, terrorists in Gaza fired rockets at Israeli citizens. Overnight, the IDF targeted an underground rocket manufacturing site after an Islamic group fired several missiles into southern Israel. The terror group fired the rockets to avenge the deaths of suspected Islamic Jihad members killed in a daytime raid by the IDF on a refugee camp in the city of Jenin. A military spokesman said the raid stopped an imminent terror attack, described as a ticking time bomb. 9 Palestinians died in the raid, most of them suspected terrorists, along with a 60-year-old woman. The IDF said it was investigating the woman's death. The Palestinian Authority declared 3 days of mourning, said it would cut off security cooperation with Israel in Palestinian cities and villages, and plans to go to the UN.
We will go to the Security Council to implement the International Protection Resolution for the Palestinian people under Chapter 7 and to stop unilateral measures.
Israel's police chief and the Minister of National Security praised the soldiers for protecting Israeli civilians. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said the state of Israel will continue to operate in any place and at any time against anyone who aims to harm the citizens of Israel. Israeli security forces are now on high alert throughout Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. A State Department spokesman said the U.S. recognizes the security challenges facing Israel, but is deeply concerned about the escalating violence. The clashes come just days before U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to arrive for talks with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Knesset members and Prime Minister Netanyahu's own party are pushing the government to evacuate a Palestinian Bedouin settlement from Israeli-controlled territory. As CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, this move is seen as a test case with international implications.
Israel's Supreme Court approved the evacuation and demolition of Khan al-Ahmar settlement in 2018. Although successive Israeli governments didn't take action, Netanyahu is now being challenged to do so.
We are here because this is our land. When it comes to illegal building in Judea and Samaria, you cannot have double standards. We saw what happened last Friday when the authorities evacuated Jewish community that was built illegally.
Khan al-Ahmar behind me is one of 80 settlements built in an area called E1 along Israel's main highway between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea. Israel says they're illegal because they're built by Palestinians with European Union money on Israeli land.
It's not just about Khan al-Ahmar, it's about the future of Judea and Samaria and the future of our ability to have a rule of law here in Judea and Samaria.
Likud Knesset members Danny Danon and Yuli Edelstein visited E1 overlooking Khan al-Ahmar. They hope Netanyahu will evacuate it, setting a precedent for the removal of dozens of other illegal Palestinian settlements in biblical Judea and Samaria.
Strategically, this area is very important and sensitive. For us, it is the bridge between Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. That's why the Palestinian Authority is putting so much energy, so much money.
The 1993 Oslo Accords designate areas in the West Bank called A and B under some degree of Palestinian control. Khan al-Ahmar is in Area C under complete Israeli control. Meir Deutsch runs Regavim, a group dedicated to preventing illegal seizure of state land in Area C in what they consider biblical Judea and Samaria.
The black is where the Palestinians have been building. Within areas A and B, you see that 70% of areas A and B. Again, under full Palestinian control, 70% of the land is not occupied.
Israel has already allocated other land for the people of Khan al-Ahmar to live on near Jerusalem.
The settlers of Khan al-Ahmar are interested, and we have it on tape. They are interested in moving to these legal plots, but the Palestinian Authority is not allowing them to move because the Palestinian Authority wants them to stay exactly over here, as I said, in the strategic place.
Palestinian protesters told journalists otherwise.
Why to move? This is the land for me as an indigenous Palestinian.
By taking this area, this land here, they just cut off the West Bank with the south from the north. This is part of the plans destroying any possibility for Palestinian state. So this is a Palestinian land. Israel is dealing with it as an Israeli land. It's not an Israeli land.
It's also about the involvement of the European Union, which leads to more complications.
The EU is very involved here in funding the illegal building here.
The EU is supplying them with illegal structures and with illegal electricity infrastructure, such as generators.
No European country can decide that they will construct illegally schools or kindergartens and then will protest the possible evacuation.
And as outside influence into the battle over the land of Israel continues, so do the internal struggles in Netanyahu's government. Julie Stahl, CBN News, overlooking Khan al-Ahmar in the hills of Judea.
Recently, a bipartisan delegation of 7 U.S. senators traveled to the member countries of the Abraham Accords to express American support for dialogue and cooperation between Israel, Morocco, Bahrain, and the UAE.
Abraham Accords are historic in many ways. As I say to some folks, decades from now, we'll look back on this time period and see a real shift that happened from the Middle East around the Abraham Accords. The reason that we planned this trip to be able to be with the key leaders in all 4 of these nations was to reaffirm America's commitment to the region, to have frank conversations about what's working, what's not working with the Abraham Accords, and to be able to ask about what other countries can join in next, and to see what we can do to continue to expand this.
Up next, remembering the Holocaust. See one woman's fierce story of survival in the face of Nazi brutality. Hanna Malka was 16 years old in March 1939 when the Nazis rolled into Czechoslovakia and took over her country in one night. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl shows us how she survived the ghetto, Auschwitz, and forced labor in Germany.
Czechoslovakia was an exemplary democracy in Europe, and the Czechs never thought Adolf Hitler would make a move to invade it. But on March 16, 1939, the Czechs awoke to a new reality.
I opened the radio and heard the president say, "Be all of you quiet, don't fight, don't do anything. The Germans occupied Czechoslovakia."
For teenager Hanna Malka and others like her, life wouldn't be the same.
For the Jews, everything changed. First of all, I couldn't go anymore to school. Then I couldn't speak with my friends, and I was, at my age, the only Jewish girl.
Hanna shared her story with journalists through a social initiative called Zikaron B'Salan, Living Room Remembrance. Founded 11 years ago in Israel, it's now in 65 countries, touching some 2 million people. It aims to connect Holocaust survivors with young people.
Then we had to give half of our flat to a Jewish family because the Germans needed flats for the German. After that, we had to go to a small village, and it was very lonely and very, very bad, so my mother sent me to Prague.
In the Czech capital's Jewish quarter, life continued for 2.5 years. Then, in November 1941, Adolf Hitler said he was giving the Jews a city and began transporting them to the Theresienstadt ghetto.
I was living in a flat of Czech family, so we were about 70 people in a 2-room flat with one WC and with one place to wash themselves. For people of our age, it was actually, we could manage. We made each other and speak with other. I had always the feeling that everyone there wanted to give the best of himself so that to make other people a little more happy.
Hitler used Theresienstadt for propaganda to deceive the world about what his true intentions were for the Jewish people. The children even put on an opera called Brundibar.
And it said that Brundibar was a bad man who wanted to do bad to them and wanted to send them somewhere, but they were fighting against him, and in the end they succeeded to be the winners.
Older people were deceived into paying money to go to Theresienstadt, thinking they were getting special treatment.
50 people died every day.
And all the time the Nazis were transporting people to Auschwitz in Poland. Eventually, Hannah and the other children were also loaded on a dark cattle car and forced to travel for days without food or water. The notorious Dr. Joseph Mengele was among those greeting them upon their arrival. He chose 200 girls, including Hannah, to be used as laborers and sent everyone else to the gas chambers.
We had to put down everything we wore. We were naked, and they took our hair, not only from the head, but from the body. Everyone got a dress, mostly a summer dress, and we asked where are all the other 1,500 people. And they told us, look to the sky and you see the smoke. These are the 1,500 people.
Hannah and the 200 girls were then sent to Germany, and she spent the rest of the war as a maid or working in a factory for the Germans. According to Hannah, they always tried to guard their humanity.
We wanted to stay people all the time. Maybe we didn't see like people, but we felt like people.
As Germany began to fall, Hannah's life was once again in danger.
They wanted to send us somewhere where they could finish us because they didn't want that the Allies should see what they made from us. But because of all these bombardments, they couldn't do it.
After the war, Hannah returned to Prague, riding halfway on a Russian tank, and life began to return to normal.
And then I didn't want to stay. The Russians came to Czechoslovakia. They were two people. They were the Russians and the Americans. And the Americans were good, but the Russians, not so much to speak about it.
In 1946, Hannah came to pre-state Israel. Like many survivors, she didn't share her story for years. Hannah's granddaughter, Ya'ara Malka, who joins her at events, was a teenager when she first heard her grandmother's story.
But the first time that I realized all the story is when I go with her to Germany. She taught in the schools, and then I got all the picture and understand everything.
Hannah, who will soon be 100 years old, has 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. After all she went through, she says she wants people to remember, no matter how bad a situation is, there's something or someone good to be found. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
Coming up, a prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, the event that brings Christians and Jews together just as the Bible commands. The Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is a prayer movement initiated and chaired by former Knesset member Robert Ilitov and co-chaired by former U.S. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Each year it brings together government leaders and Christian leaders for a gathering in Israel's capital city to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Since its beginnings, the Prayer Breakfast has now gone to the nations around the world. I talked with its director, Albert Wexler, about the impact of the Prayer Breakfast and where it's coming next. Albert Wexler, director of the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. Great to be with you here in Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you for having me.
You were there at the beginning of how this all began, and how far has it grown since the time?
Well, Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast started with Robert Ilitov, as he was the chairman of the Christian Allies Caucus in 2016, asking for my help. And I gave him the idea of bringing the Jews and Christians together to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. At first he thought I'm out of my mind, but then Reuven Rivlin, then president, endorsed it and loved it. So you remember we came to President's residence and he received us with open arms and said that he had been longing for the prayers of the Christians. Now we've had 16 prayer breakfasts in addition to the 6 we've had in Jerusalem, the annual ones here. We've been all over the world, in Brazil most recently, and then before that in Dallas, Texas, in Estonia, Holland, Australia, going back to Australia soon. So it's going to be quite interesting what we have in place. And now Houston, that's the most important one.
Yeah. What kind of reaction do you have people in different countries and different cities when they attend a Jerusalem prayer breakfast?
I think they love it. They love the idea that the Israeli government has issued a call to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that we have people from the cabinet and the people from Knesset come and encourage the Christian friends of Israel to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I think there is also a challenge because I think many people, many nations, they want to see their countries stand together with Israel. And you know, there are countries that stand with Israel, there are countries that don't stand with Israel. They are opposing Israel vehemently. So I think many are challenged to pray for the governments so that they would align themselves with God's purposes with Jerusalem.
Yeah. You talked about Houston. Tell us about what's coming up.
Houston, we will have a great event in the Westin Hotel in Galleria. We have the mayor of Houston welcoming us. We have Governor Greg Abbott. He will be our host, I believe, in Texas. And then we have several people coming from the Knesset. We've had, of course, our Israeli Consul General, Livia Link-Raviv, come and speak. Many great speakers from Houston area. And I think the most important part, people will gather and pray. And that's what you know. We do a lot during the Jerusalem prayer breakfast. We actually
you pray.
Do pray.
Not
yes.
just the breakfast.
Yes.
So if people want to come to the Houston prayer breakfast, how would they find out about it?
We have a website called jpbtexas.org. So the moment you go JPB Texas, you will find all the information for how to register. Maybe you want to sponsor a table. You want to come for the Shabbat dinner. We have Yehuda Glick doing the Shabbat dinner. It was a great success in Dallas. And so he was gracious, to receive everybody as if we were their family, blessing us, over the Shabbat. So it's going to be an unforgettable event. I believe most important, it's to challenge and to bring people to pray for the peace of Jerusalem as we are facing these very critical times in our history. The covenant relations between United States and Israel must be strengthened.
Well, it'll be a great event. Thank you, Albert, for being here.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Still ahead, songs from the Holy City, the musicians worshiping the Lord like David did. The Bible says David played his harp to worship the Lord. Well, that's exactly what this next group of musicians did on the southern steps of the Temple Mount. Take a look.
משפחתך, תפילתך, דורותיך, אחריך, רוחו תלך לפניך, לצידך, אחריך, בסביבך, בליבך, הוא איתך, הוא איתך, בבוקר ובערב, בצאתך, בספורך, בסקלותיך, באושריך, הוא איתך, הוא איתך.
Beautiful music. To find the full video of this concert, go to YouTube and search for the King's Harpist, or go to their Facebook page called The King's Harpist. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.